Good evening and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Tuesday, August 21st, 2012. I'm Tony Paniagua. Mexico is Arizona's largest international trading partner, but in today's tough financial climate, our state would welcome an economic boost from this important neighbor to the south. The mayors of Tucson and Phoenix recently visited parts of that country to improve connections and communication. And tonight we hear about the trip to the state of Sonora and Mexico City.
All right, everybody ready? My purpose for going to Mexico was to help bring jobs to Tucson. And let me give you a little background of some of the simple facts. The deepwater port in Los Angeles, which is now full, brings an estimated 1.2 million trade-related jobs to the state of California and puts an estimated $63 billion into California's economy. More containers run through that port than any other port in the United States. The second largest port, deepwater port in the United States, is at Long Beach, just to the south, and it brings an estimated 316,000 jobs to Southern California. We visited first the deepwater port in Guaymas. The purpose of that is it is the new Mexican government's plan to double the size of that deepwater port. We need to make sure that Tucson is the inland port and logistics center that connects with the deepwater port in Guaymas. This can mean millions, and I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say billions of dollars for our local economy. It diversifies our economy, and it puts us on a sound path to economic sustainability. In my conversations with Mexican elected and government officials, with representatives in the Port of Guaymas, and with business people from both countries, I made it clear that Tucson is by far the best possible choice of inland hub for the rail distribution network connecting the U.S. to the deepwater port in Guaymas. And we should not take this for granted. As you're coming up from Guaymas, and there is that corridor from Guaymas to Hermosillo to Nogales to Tucson to Phoenix, the Sun Corridor is not just Phoenix to Tucson, it is Phoenix to Guaymas. But as you're coming up through Hermosillo, you can take a left to Tijuana, or you can take a right towards McAllen, Texas. We have to make sure here in Tucson and in Arizona that we do everything we can to make this the inland port of choice. I can't put a number on it. I know two things. I believe the port in Guaymas is going to double in size. Right there, that should, all things being equal, double what we can bring to this country. Beyond that, I think if we put the correct emphasis on it, we can make that grow exponentially. And so I can't put a number on it because it depends on a lot of things. It depends also partly on the success of Mexico and the stability of Mexico. And so we need to work with that too. And in our country, being prepared with the infrastructure, whether it's rail, whether it's roads, whether it's having the ability to have headquartered businesses here. We do have, and for anyone who doesn't know, in the southeast part of the community, out not far from the tech park, an inland port. In other words, a place where rail comes in, it can spur off, where there are some warehouses. It's still small, and yes, the bottom line is that's one place we can be. We can also be over close to Santa Fe, coming up the I-19, and there's room over there for growth. And so I think it's going to be ultimately driven by the private sector in the world we're in now, but it's our job to help coordinate that. In bringing jobs to Tucson, this is what I tried to make clear to all of the folks that we met with in Mexico. First of all, that in Tucson, we are interested in trade opportunities with Mexico. Mexico, by far, is Arizona's top trading partner. Mexico to the United States is the second largest trading partner in the world, $470 billion last year, second only to China. But just in Arizona, our jobs exported about $6 billion in goods to Mexico, and imports were about $6.2 billion. We tried to make it clear that Tucson is interested in tourism business coming from Mexico, and it is so important that Tucson obtain more direct air routes. We don't have a direct air route now from Tucson to Mexico City. If we did, it is the exact same amount of time to get to Mexico City, the second largest city in the world, as it is to Denver. We made it clear that Tucson is interested in jobs and economic development for our region. And we also made it clear that Tucson is a center of intellectual capital, a science city, with strength and growth in numbers of science and technology industry sectors. I also delivered the message that Tucson is not interested in demonizing Mexico, Mexicans, or people of Mexican descent. We are neighbors, and we need to work on solutions to problems together. I believe I was successful in delivering those messages, and my staff and I are going to continue to build those connections and to lobby vigorously to have Tucson be the inland port on the U.S. Guaymas rail system. My office door remains open to business seeking to export to Mexico or to have other business opportunities to create jobs in Tucson. The conversation we had with the representatives from the pre-government is that they would like us to come back in the spring once they're in office and really meet with, and they even extended an invitation to meet with the president. And we want to do that. We're going to continue with the business sector. For me, starting on the smaller goals, getting those air flights is just critical to this community. I didn't like it when the people in Phoenix were saying, oh, it's too bad you have to fly into Phoenix from our city. And, you know, I had a few words for them, but not for television. You know, we all expressed a concern for border security and how that's dealt with. We all expressed a concern about the rhetoric, both back and forth. And so in the sense I got from the Mexican officials, this is one region, and we have to work on these problems together.
Experts across the country are concerned about the growing problem of obesity in the United States, and Pima County is no exception. The county alone spends hundreds of millions of dollars on obesity-related health care, so many professionals are trying to target children with education and healthier choices. Luis Carrion has that story from the largest school district in southern Arizona.
Sweetheart, do you want watermelon? You want apples?
It's lunchtime at Menlo Park School.
Do you want apples too?
This is a typical scene in TUSD, which is Tucson's largest school district. And for many of the kids here, this could very well be the most nutritious meal of their day.
Broccoli? Both? Yeah. So I would say the nuggets, the macaroni and cheese, then the broccoli, and then the fruit last.
Tina Gonzalez is the kitchen manager here at Menlo Park.
We normally serve about 240 to 2, maybe 60.
She says lunch is an important part of the day for these students, and the key to feeding so many kids is efficiency.
The first group of students will go by, and they're going to go to the express table because they've picked the express lunch, which is the taco salad. The students that are waiting here have picked the tray.
Gonzalez has been managing kitchen operations here for 16 years. She says there have been changes in the way TUSD feeds students.
The changes that I've seen are the healthy choices. We used to serve cakes and stuff with a lot of sugar, a lot of starchy food. You know, of course we have the protein, but the fruits and the vegetables, so it's a lot more healthier for the student.
The health of the students is a concern, particularly in light of statistics provided by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which state obesity now affects 17% of all children and adolescents in the United States. This is triple the rate from just one generation ago. Physicians and nutritionists say at the most basic level, the problem is the result of eating too many calories and not getting enough physical exercise.
If we're going to do something about childhood obesity, we really have to do something about both sides of what we call the energy balance equation. Burn more calories, get more active, and not necessarily eat less calories. That sometimes is a part of it, or just eat healthier calories.
Scott Goin is a professor in nutritional sciences at the University of Arizona. Part of his work is in childhood obesity prevention, and he says the problem has now reached epidemic proportions.
In Arizona, approximately 35% of our kids are probably overweight or obese. It's approaching 1 out of between 4 and 5 now, kids who are actually obese.
Goin says children that are overweight or obese are more likely to develop health problems as they move into adulthood.
Kids who are fatter when they're children or adolescents tend to be heavier adults, and it's heavier adults that have all of the chronic diseases that you hear about. More kids are experiencing diabetes at a younger age. That's true. So it's not just a media hype. It is a real problem. In Arizona, we're not in the top third, but we're approaching sort of the middle in terms of the statistics here in our state.
There's been almost a doubling to tripling of obesity in children, the most predominant in the age groups in 6 to 11 years of age.
Pediatric endocrinologist Priti Patel is at the front lines of the fight against obesity among young people.
In mainstream classes.
Families come to her to help treat diseases that have historically been the domain of older adults and are caused by a poor diet and insufficient exercise.
So if we're not able to work at the prevention stage, then really a lot of studies have shown that most obese adults or obese children, and that leads to just increased complications in the future. And we're also seeing an early onset of complications such as type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol.
No broccoli. Okay.
There are many factors that can contribute to the prevalence of obesity among young people. And school diet is an important piece of the puzzle that needs consideration.
We serve just over 100 schools, and we serve 40,000 meals a day.
Lindsay Aguilar is a dietitian and the production technical coordinator for TUSD Food Services. She says TUSD is the second largest school district in the state, and with 40,000 meals being served per day, they play an important role in the health of these kids.
Yes, for a lot of our kids, that's true. They eat breakfast and lunch with us every day, so they're getting 2 meals out of the 3 meals that they get. For some kids, unfortunately, it could be the only 2 meals that they get.
Honey, do you want watermelon?
Aguilar says there's no single answer to the epidemic of obesity among young people. She points out that these meals represent some of the healthier options that are now available through TUSD Food Services.
We're pretty ahead of the game as far as we've been doing a lot of these things for the past 5 years, where we've implemented whole grains and fruits and vegetables. So salads have now been on our elementary menus for 3 years now. They have salads once a week. Our middle and high schools have salads every day. So those are steps compared to maybe 6 years ago that salads weren't necessarily something that a lot of school meal programs had on the menu.
We continue the conversation now with an assistant research professor in the University of Arizona's Department of Nutritional Sciences. Caitlin Harrington has that interview.
Joining me in studio today is Melanie Hingle. She is an assistant research professor with the Nutritional Sciences Department at the University of Arizona. Melanie, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Caitlin.
I have you here to talk about the increasing epidemic of childhood obesity and some of the preventative research that you've been doing. But first, can you talk to us a little bit about why this is such a big issue as far as the children's health goes?
Sure. This is a very complex issue, but it relates to the incidence of chronic disease. And so anytime you're overweight or obese, you have an increased risk of becoming overweight, obese as an adult, and then in turn having cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, things like that.
And Melanie, talk to us about some of the research you're doing. It's mostly done as preventative methods to keep children from becoming obese rather than stopping it where it's already at. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah. I mostly engage in obesity prevention interventions, which are programs to help people engage in healthier lifestyles, so primarily focused around diet and physical activity. And in my research, I use a lot of participatory research methods, meaning we actually go out to the community and engage youth and families and community members in building the program. So in that case, it makes it more relevant to them and more relevant to their daily lives, rather than coming in and saying, one should do this, you should do that.
And can you talk to us about one of the programs that you have in place currently? You have Stealth Health as one, and also the mobile. Can you talk about both of those?
Absolutely. So Stealth Health is an example of a mobile health intervention, and it actually is funded by the USDA. It is a 3-year project, and I'm funded along with my colleagues in nutritional sciences and many other departments across campus. I want to acknowledge actually Dr. Scott Going, who is in this interview, and many others. It is designed to increase adolescents, 12 to 18, physical activity and healthy eating behavior through mobile applications. These are software applications on smartphones. So the intent is to get kids moving, get them out in the community, learning more about nutrition, but using their smartphones that they already have.
And previous to this interview, we spoke about the misconception that it might be just the parenting or just the fast food that contributes to childhood obesity. But as we talked, you said it's more complex than just one or two issues. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. Obesity is a very complex issue, and so it's not just one intervention, one program that will do the trick, but rather if you think of it of where youth are, where families are in a community, and all the factors that influence behavior on a day-to-day basis. So not only do we want to help people, give them the tools to lead healthier lifestyles, but we want them to be living in a community that supports healthy behavior changes. So it's very important to us here in all the programming that we do to integrate with our partners in the community, with cooperative extension here at the University of Arizona, to really translate research findings to practical, everyday steps that can help people be in the best health they can be. So part of that, our community strategies such as increasing healthy options in schools, making healthier foods more accessible in grocery stores, and even translating that to the home where parents can structure the home environment in a way that helps kids eat more fruits and vegetables, for example, and less junk food.
As the school year is starting up, obviously kids are going to be spending a majority of their time at school and in the classrooms. Over the last couple of years, as this issue has been brought more to light, does there seem to be a big change in the menus that schools are offering and the way that kids are eating while they're at school?
Yes, I think so. Definitely here in Pima County, and I know in Arizona broadly, there have been initiatives that have helped get more fruits and vegetables into schools, less ready-made convenience foods, reducing the amount of what they call competitive foods that are sold after school and during school events, which are really not as healthy options. And so I know there have been great strides in that. A lot of our, again, university translate to the community programming focuses on what are the best choices to make if you're a kid out there, how to go about eating healthy snacks and preparing them yourself. So a lot of what we do is very much empowerment activities for the kids and families, and then complemented by what you're describing, basically that's happening in the schools where they're making things more healthy. And again, the supportive environment along with the knowledge and abilities and skills. It's really the best approach.
What are some of the steps that parents can take, the very basic steps to helping their children live healthier lifestyles?
That's a great question. The best thing parents can do is be a good role model for their child. So that means if they want their child to eat healthy, they should eat healthy. If they want them to be active, they should be active. And as a family, a lot of research shows that eating together as a family is very beneficial as well, and doing things together as a family. So that's really at the core of what we teach parents and how we work with parents to improve their healthy lifestyles is doing things together. Another way is structuring the home environment in a way that supports kid behaviors, I already mentioned. So making fruits and vegetables very accessible, cut up in the fridge, for example, sending your child to school with those things in their lunchbox, those types of strategies. But really, it's all about support, parental support, role modeling, and then not making them do things, but instead of working with them, because kids will immediately push back and not want to do it if you try to make them. So,
we have about 30 seconds left, but can you tell us what are some of the things or some of the places that parents can reach out to if they want to find more information as far as what to do with their children and keeping them healthy?
Sure. Most immediately, we have some great programs here through Cooperative Extension and the Department of Nutritional Sciences. So they can contact us. I can be a gatekeeper, and I can lead them to some colleagues who are doing great work in the community. On a national level, there's, of course, the USDA and the dietary guidelines that will give you nutrition advice that is available online as well. It's very solid and evidence-based.
Well, Melanie, thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us all of the information.
Thanks, Caitlin.
We have a big show for you tonight. The Beatles, Creedence, Clearwater Revival, the Supremes, the Mamas and the Papas, Curry and the Pacemakers, the Animals, the Beach Boys, the Fifth Dimension, the Turtles, and the Rolling Stones.
Tonight at 8 on PBS 6.
Words can have different interpretations and intentions, and one word that has been used by Western civilization for thousands of years is savage. What is a savage? One explanation is that it is a category used for a group of people to justify aggression or deny them of their equal rights. Next, Mark McLemore talks with Robert A. Williams, a professor of law at the University of Arizona, about his new book called Savage Anxieties.
The author of this new work called Savage Anxieties is Robert A. Williams, Jr. He's a professor of law here at the University of Arizona, where he's been teaching for about 26 years. So tell us, what was the initial kernel of an idea that developed into this book?
Yeah, I've been doing research basically all my life, for 30 years as an academic, on the role of the idea of the savage in the way that Western civilization is related to tribal peoples. I started out, of course, looking at my area of specialty, American Indian law, and this idea of the savage. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, the early Supreme Court decisions all used this idea to justify the dispossession of Indian tribes, of their traditional territories. And I began to trace this idea not only in the U.S., but in Australia, throughout Latin America. And as you begin to work with the idea, you see it has a continuity that goes way back in Western history.
Well, can you outline for us what the classical or the Greek era idea of what the savage represented?
That's actually where it begins, in the very first written works of written literature in the West, Homer's Odyssey and the Iliad, those two great poems. We're introduced to the idea of the savage. Homer talks about tribes of centaurs fought by the great warrior heroes. You have various heroes who defeat the Minotaur, and the whole idea that the conquest of the earth as held by savage beings and monstrous creatures is what defines the hero in early Greek poetry. And we see this idea of the savage and being confronting Western civilization repeated by the Romans. You can walk around Rome today and see the great battle monuments to triumphs over the barbarian tribes of Europe. It's repeated by the Church in the Crusades, and of course we see it with Columbus and his use of the idea of the savage. And it continues on, not only into our founding era, but even into 21st century Indian law decisions of the United States Supreme Court.
Why do you think, though, that so long ago the idea of supernatural powers and even inhuman continences was attributed to the savages? How did that come to be part of it?
Yeah, the Greeks usually placed the savage on the outer peripheries of distant ocean and dark, foreboding places. And it really is a reflection of this fundamental fear that I think all cultures have of the other. This notion of the savage, I was in Taiwan, where I have a former student who's a professor, and I found out that the indigenous Taiwanese were called savages by the Japanese that conquered them. You find many tribal languages which identify the tribe as the people and everybody else as barbarians. So I think it does reflect a fundamental human tendency to fear the other, to try to define the other, to fix the other. But ultimately, when you're dealing out of ignorance and just a lack of fundamental understanding, it's usually those stereotypes, those cliches that we all are so familiar with that we grasp onto.
And it's used as a justification then to say, it's okay, we can do what we want. These people don't understand how the world works, and we're going to impart some order on their chaotic lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I just was in Australia, and I've been there before. And really, this is the first time I've met a lot of Native people willing to talk about the stolen generation. Australia's issued an official apology for that policy that was followed in the United States and Canada with residential schools of removing Indigenous children from the home because that was where savagery was bred. And the only way to civilize these children, literally, as the head of the American Indian education system for the U.S. in the 19th century said, was to kill the Indian and save the man. And you see that idea and that legacy of this language of savagery played out today in intergenerational trauma, in Supreme Court decisions, in the contemporary human rights struggles of indigenous peoples around the world.
Well, point out a way for us that it's still impacting the way decisions are being made in Arizona in the 21st century.
Yeah, the United States Department of Justice, Amnesty International have all identified an epidemic of violence against Indian women, particularly in Indian communities. And the vast majority of time, the statistics show that this violence is perpetuated and perpetrated by non-Indians. And the Supreme Court and Congress have refused to give power, to recognize the inherent power of tribes to punish those offenders who come onto the reservation and basically beat up and abuse Indian women. And so tribes have asked Congress to amend legislation. Congress has refused. In the most recent session, it's refused to amend the relevant legislation. Tribes have gone to the Supreme Court asking for this jurisdiction. The court refuses, and it cites the very same 19th century cases which use this idea of the savage as the central justification for U.S. power over Indian tribes.
What's a remedy or solution that you would advocate for us to rise above this?
Yeah, I actually use and I cite a lot of the cognitive psychological research, which talks about the harmful role of stereotypes. I mean, we see a movie like Avatar or Dances with Wolves, and even those, sort of benign images of the noble savage, situate and freeze Indian people and indigenous peoples in this sort of poetic past, and it doesn't really help us understand the problems and the contemporary situation confronting Indian nations today as they have to govern their own territories and lands. And so I think the best approach, and what the research shows, is to confront these stereotypes, is to be aware of them, to be aware how easily they're triggered by familiar images that we see on TV or hear politicians speak, for example.
Well, thanks for providing a historical and sociological perspective to this issue, and good luck with your research in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Community gardens are making a resurgence in many cities around the world, and tonight we take you to one in Tucson where friends and neighbors get to put their green thumbs to good use. It's tonight's video postcard.
These are so many, I don't know how we could even pick them all.
I think this is the yellow lemon cucumbers. We got plenty of flowers, and I saw quite a few bees here.
It's kind of funny, they're like look like little Fraggle Rock hairs or something, right? Right, these are dark, so those are ready to be planted. Basically, you just take those and, sprinkle them on. And all of these, the small artichokes you see here in the community center were self-seeded, and we let them mature enough, and then we transplanted them in. So next year we'll have a good harvest.
You can get more news and information on our website, azpm.org. To comment on any story you saw tonight, click on it online and go to the bottom. We can also be reached via Facebook and Twitter. Coming up tomorrow night, Tucson is known as one of the best cities for bicycling in the nation, but how does the Phoenix area stack up? And a local aviation program is benefiting from a major donation, an airplane that will serve as a tactile teaching tool. I'm Tony Paniagua. From all of us at Arizona Public Media, have a great night.